For the next 2 hours, I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country. We have plenty coming up, as always. We're drilling into the cost of living crisis and fuel prices with a range of people who really know what they're talking about, can analyse it and come up with tips for you as well. Plus, we'll also be looking at what the Prince of Wales is said to have said about the Rwanda policy. That with Jenny Bond in just a moment. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here's Tamsin Roberts.
Alistair, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Prince Charles has reportedly described the government's policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda as appalling. He's said to have made the comment during a private conversation, according to The Times. Clarence House insists he is politically neutral. It's after the High Court ruled the first deportation flight to the African nation can go ahead on Tuesday. Campaign groups are expected to appeal, with the case set to be heard on Monday. Conservative MP John Whittingdale told GB News he thinks the policy is sensible and meets all its objectives.
The people who will be sent to Rwanda are young males who are economically active, where there is a shortage in Rwanda. There is not in this country. We have problems being created by the level of migration. In Rwanda, they want to have migrants, and the people trying to get to this country do so because they want to be economically active and to be able to earn money, which they will be able to do. So on the basic policy, I have no great difficulty. I think it meets a number of objectives. The court ruling yesterday, I would hope also, is a recognition that Parliament decided that it favoured this policy, and it is for Parliament to decide and not for the courts.
A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a teenager was stabbed at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old boy's mother, who was also seriously injured, is now in a stable condition in hospital. Police, who've described the attack in the Miles Platting area as ferocious, believe the 44-year-old suspect is known to the victims. 3 people have been charged with the murder of a father whose remains were found in a woodland in Beaconsfield. Mohammed Shah Subani was reported missing in May 2019 when he failed to return to his West London home. The 27-year-old's body was discovered 7 months later. The accused are due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today. Brazilian police searching for a missing British journalist have found what appears to be human remains in the Amazon River. Dom Phillips and Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Police are reportedly focusing their investigation on illegal fishermen and poachers. Interest rates for student loans will be capped for a year to protect against soaring inflation. Borrowers were facing a 12% rate at the end of the summer, but from September that's been cut to 7.3%. The Department for Education says it's the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record. The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help struggling families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell says dozens have to pay privately to get a prescription at a time when the cost of living is soaring. She said those aged 18 or under can access treatment, but older children are being forgotten.
These mothers and fathers that are nursing them are absolutely exhausted, and they are having to budget really tightly simply because the cost of living crisis that we're in now has really took a grip on them. So I would like to appeal to Sajid, the Health Secretary, to extend RESCAS for these forgotten children over 18.
Calls for a new salt and sugar tax are expected to be rejected in the latest government food strategy to be published on Monday. A leaked paper suggests that ministers will leave out key recommendations from a major review. The report had called for a sugar and salt tax as part of efforts to transform the nation's diet and to protect the environment. The government is expected to accept most of the report's recommendations. 1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to make ends meet for even 1 month if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association say a quarter of people also believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months amid the ongoing cost of living crisis. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. There is a lot about the Prince of Wales in the newspapers this morning. If you're listening on radio to us here at GB News, I'm now holding up the Sun newspaper, the country's most popular, Red Top as they call it, and it says Charles and Camilla to do strictly at the palace. Now, that is, of course, of some interest, but I choose that because of the word strictly, because the more serious story that's doing the rounds is this, and I'm now holding up the Daily Mail. Charles attacks, and it's in quotation marks, appalling Rwanda scheme. And that's in the broadsheets, it's in the red tops, it's right across the piece. So before we get on to talking about the cost of living and fuel and all the rest of it, we're really going to have to talk about that. A flight to take asylum seekers to Rwanda from the UK has been allowed at this stage by the High Court and is set to leave on Tuesday. There'll be appeals and all the rest of it. It's widely reported this morning, however, that the Prince of Wales has let it be known in private conversations that he thinks the government's policy is appalling. The Times says his staff at Clarence House don't deny that he's opposed to the policy, but like pretty well all of the newspapers, they go on the quote that his spokesman says, the Prince, and I quote, remains politically neutral and matters of policy are decisions for the government. Well, in 2018, the frequently outspoken Prince of Wales said, when king, he would curb his enthusiasm for commenting on matters of policy in public or in his famous black spider memos that he tends to send to senior ministers. The Prince himself said, I'm not that stupid. Well, I mentioned this on Twitter about an hour ago that we'd be talking about it, and goodness me, you have been in touch on our big topic, but also on the Rwanda migrant ruling and Prince Charles's private reaction to it. Darryl says the Rwanda decision's a great decision. The lefty lawyers must be seething. Robert says, is Prince Charles engaging in private comment on validly held views involved in politics? Are the royals expected to be zombies in their private world? And Patrick, a good friend of ours, Patrick O'Flynn, says the policy on the Rwanda scheme shows it to be a classic example of a contentious political issue that an heir to the throne should swerve. So keep those views coming in and do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We are, of course, at GB News. So let's reflect upon Rwanda, the Prince of Wales, and what is said in private and in public. Now, with the great Jenny Bond, journalist and royal commentator, formerly court correspondent, of course, with the BBC. Very good of you to join us at relatively short notice on this one, Jenny. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to start with what Patrick O'Flynn said in that last tweet, where he said, really, he should swerve these matters of contention like his mother has brilliantly done for the last 70 years. Paddy's not wrong, is he?
But he isn't his mother. He's not the monarch. He is the Prince of Wales. And I, for one, woke up this morning and saw those headlines and thought, good for you, Charles. That's just great. You've come out and you've said what you think, albeit privately. But Clarence House is not denying it. I think they would deny it if these conversations had not been had. And maybe Charles wanted his views to be known. He's a compassionate man. I know he is. He's a deep-thinking, philosophical man of great sentiment. And I think he feels strongly about this. And I think he feels the policy is appalling.
Yeah. Let me pick you up crucially on that middle point that you make and remind folk listening to our conversation that, as I tweeted, you really are one in the know because you've ducked and dived through similar briefings and similar stories and leaks and the rest of it in the past. How do you think that this, in quotation marks, appalling, got out? Is it a conscious leak with his approval, or is it an over-enthusiastic staffer maybe freelancing on the Prince's behalf? What do you reckon?
Well, the report suggests that he didn't say this just once, but several times in private conversations. And I think if he has made similar remarks several times, he probably wasn't averse to his views being aired publicly. He's concerned about the fact he's going to Rwanda shortly for the CHOGM meeting, and that this could overshadow the whole migrant policy, could overshadow the meeting. And he's concerned about that. So I think he probably knew it would get out.
Picking you up, you said CHOGM, which is the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, I think June the 23rd from memory, which is being held, as you say quite rightly, in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. It struck me when I read that in the coverage that not only might the Prince have created some difficulties between himself and the Home Office and Priti Patel here in the UK, but also he might have created some problems with himself and Rwanda. There he is turning up saying a policy based upon sending folk who arrive here across the channel in inflatable boats should go there, and that's appalling. Doesn't say much about Rwanda, does it?
Well, I think he feels that the policy is appalling, sending them, deporting them no matter where. I don't think it's particularly specific to Rwanda. I just think that he might agree with me that this policy smacks of people trafficking, paying other countries to take poor souls that we don't want to be bothered with. I feel strongly about it, and I think Prince Charles does too.
Interesting you say that you agree with it, and I know that you are now, you're a freelancer and you write brilliantly in various places. You don't now work for the BBC. But over the last couple of days, and you may or may not have noticed, I wrote a piece about impartiality. On the BBC, apart from quoting the Home Secretary's defence of this policy, virtually every other talking head is either a lawyer or one of the charities saying what you just said, that it's dreadful. Where's the balance?
I think there's plenty of balance. I mean, you only have to listen to, for example, Nicky Campbell's phone-in on 5 Live, and they had all sorts of different opinions coming in there.
Yeah,
and then
but that's Joe and Joanna Public. It's not somebody from some organisation or some officialdom. It's what ordinary folk out there actually think.
Yes, it is. But I noticed on Sky News just the other day, they had a Home Office worker, a member of staff, speaking anonymously, saying that they thought this was an appalling example of human trafficking. So I think you are hearing other voices in the media. I think it is relatively balanced, as far as I've seen.
Good. Well, I'm glad that's your feeling, and I will keep my eyes peeled, because we're coming from exactly the same position. We just want to see that. We don't have strongly held views ourselves when we were employed as public service broadcasters, but right now we can say what we think, and we want to hear what folk out there think as well. Final point, and it's back to the main thrust of the argument, Jenny. A, because I think it's important, and B, I'm really anxious to know what you think about it. I quoted what he said in that BBC documentary back in 2018, that he wouldn't be that stupid, he'd be more cautious. But we are now in this virtual transition period where increasingly he's standing in for Her Majesty the Queen, whether it's the Maundy money or whether it's the state opening of Parliament. Doesn't that mean that more caution needs to be applied now, not when he actually sits on the throne?
Well, I just wonder if we're not entering, or could not enter, into a new era. Does our monarch have to be so completely stum about everything? He's human. He's got feelings. We know many of the things he thinks already, because he has been outspoken. And I, for one, actually think that he can speak out more than his mother has when he is monarch. Interfering in government policies, no, that can't be. But just saying what he thinks, good Lord, he's human. Can we have a bit more of that, please?
Brilliant. I leave you with a challenge, Jenny Bond, and that is you can rewrite Badgett on what the rights and responsibilities are of the monarchy. I would buy that book and I would read it with great pleasure. Jenny, always a pleasure. And I said at the very beginning, I know you've got a busy day and indeed a busy weekend, but thanks very much for finding time to share your authority and knowledge with us here on GB News. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Pleasure.
The great Jenny Bond. Absolutely fascinating. Bear in mind, she knows more about the royal family than very many journalists out there, and she held that high office with the BBC. And there she is saying, well, he's entitled to have his view, and maybe it's the institution itself that we need to rethink a little bit about how he and other members of the senior members of the royal family can chip into our public debate while staying within the rules. Jenny wants to rewrite the rules. I'd buy that, as I just said. So I hope you found that interesting. Keep those comments coming in. Now, we're going to talk basics today, as I said at the very top, about the cost of living crisis and this with people who know how it's all come about and who might just have an idea or two about how to get out of it and help you get through it. It's about many of us not being able to afford the things that we need and, on a good day, the things that we'd quite like. It's about the price of stuff going up so quickly that our earnings simply can't keep up with it. Inflation, in simple terms, happens when we want more of what's available. Producers and manufacturers put their prices up because they can. And long term, that also brings back price stability as higher prices choke off demand. It's very simple O-level, A-level economics. Now, currently, gas and oil are the classic examples. There's less of it due to the war in Ukraine and the partial boycott of Russian supplies, coupled with rising energy demand as the world tries to climb out of the post-COVID slowdown. All of that means higher prices for heating our homes, for getting from A to B in our cars. The price of transporting stuff by lorry rises because the higher prices that lorry drivers have to pay has to be passed on by the supermarkets, or everyone goes broke. Then there's government policy, which pretty well doubles the wholesale price of a gallon with VAT and duties. There's also the challenge of producing more of anything, the price of which is rising. If you put more into the marketplace, hey, prices go down. More gas and oil wells, fracking, alternative energy sources, all of it. But that takes time. And there are also political problems with some of it too. So today I'll be asking what we can do about the cost of energy, how we can produce more of what we want to buy, and I'll ask, can the government do more? Should it do more when the Prime Minister says, quotes, you can't tax and spend your way out of recession. But the Chancellor hints he probably can't afford to cut taxes either. The largest cost, taxes, to all working people. Given debt, borrowing and inflation, it's a real problem. As always, email me your thoughts, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or tweet, as you have been busily already this morning. We're at GB News. So joining me first, two great guests, a former oil man and Tory Minister, Sir Alan Duncan, and sitting with me here live in the studio, someone who has just published, and he's got it on the desk there, his latest review of the state of UK manufacturing, my good friend Rory McCallion. Alan, let's come to you first, if I may. Is there any way that our fuel and energy bit of the cost of living crisis can be curbed, or is it that classic thing that you and I know so well, you can't buck markets?
Well, if I might say so, Alice, I thought your introduction was brilliant. I thought you captured all the dilemmas and the issues at the moment. I don't think there is any way of fighting back on what is an external global commodity spike. I think the big issue for domestic policymakers is to work out what sort of inflation this is. I mean, you and I, if I can put it this way, are just old enough to remember the inflation of the 70s, which was wholesale economic cancer. All prices were going up. The value of money was going down. The pound was under pressure. Everyone wanted wage claims, and so it went on. In this case, I think we've got a one-off step change in externally created prices, which is causing massive pain, of course, for people who can't afford to fill their car or heat their home. But the question is whether this is wholesale inflation or whether it's going to suck away spending, as you said in your introduction, from other areas, which, of course, is actually a deflationary influence. So I think the only reason for putting up interest rates is to protect the value of the pound, because if the pound were to fall further, and it is weak, that, of course, puts up the price at the pump and on the street even more. So I don't think this is wholesale 1970s style inflation. And therefore, I think policymakers have got to stop and think, what sort of inflation is this, and how, therefore, do we react to it? And labour markets are completely different from what they were 40 years ago. So it's painful, and I think the policy response should be targeted help to the poorest people who cannot pay their bills. I thought that the splurge the other day was the wrong, or slightly wrong, because it benefited everybody and it should have been better targeted. But apart from that, the focus should be to help people who can't pay their bills and appreciate that this is a one-off thing, which may not continue to rise. So, if oil's, let's say, doubled, is it going to double again? Probably not. So it's if you like, everyone's gone up a notch, and probably that's where it's going to be, and it's going to adjust spending patterns.
All right, Alan, I'm going to bring Rory in at this point because he's been hanging on your every word and nodding with some of it and shaking his head on the other bit. That Alan, absolutely brilliant explanation at the top of it as well there, but predominantly, and he'd be the first to admit it, was talking about you, me, as individual consumers and the government trying to help, particularly with energy bills. You don't speak for British industry, but as I said in my intro, you know more about it. I mean, for lorry drivers, for manufacturers, for refrigeration, they're hurting as much and nobody's giving them a penny piece.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was shaking my head about as Alan was speaking, to be honest. Now, you mentioned the UK manufacturing outlook. We have got here an indication of the energy prices for steel, right? Which we talked about when we were on Liam Halligan's show a couple of weeks ago. And in the UK steel makers are paying 50 to 60% more for energy than they are in France and Germany. The net result is that our steel industry has shrunk. Now, when you're talking about the price of fuel, there are three elements to it. There's the wholesale element, there's fuel price duty, and there's VAT. VAT is a percentage, and it will go, and the amount coming will go up and down depending on the price. Now, the amount that the basic commodity has increased has meant that VAT has gone up a great deal. I think that the government can do something there. They can reduce the fuel price duty, which will have a positive knock-on effect about, to all those areas that you were talking about, to the lorry drivers, to the cost of getting food into the supermarkets.
Because they pay the same VAT and duty as you and I do.
Yes, they do. I mean, air freight, there is no duty on at all. But the tankers and the trucks that you see going around, yes, they are paying the same.
Well, I'll be talking to our mutual friend Philip Judge about that a little bit later on. Yes. Let me bring Alan back in at that point, because the other side of that coin, Alan, and you said you didn't like the splurge that happened a little earlier on. There is a raging debate within your party, and Rishi Sunak saying, I've got to be very careful about cutting taxes because that's tricky at the moment. And then Sajid Javid giving a big interview to the Times today saying we need to start cutting taxes as soon as possible, because rather than the splurge, as you put it, that puts more money back in your pocket, my pocket, Rory's pocket. We can make our own decisions, and that will help us also cope with energy prices in the petrol tank and in the boiler.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the government's going through a pretty rickety patch at the moment, but I think it would be wrong just to play to your own supporters by trying to give money to them. I mean, I'm an instinctive low-tax person. I think if we have lower taxes across the board, we're more competitive, manufacturing is attracted to the UK, etc., etc., etc. The question is, what are we going to do now? And there is massive pain, I think, for the poorest people in the country, and we should be the government for the whole country, not just for our favoured supporters. And therefore, I think that across-the-board tax cuts at the moment, for instance, income tax cuts, would be almost immoral because it would benefit those who pay the most tax and are instinctively, or at least actually the richest in the country. I think for the moment, we have to target cuts and benefits to help those who can't pay the bills. Now, you could, for instance, take VAT off certain things, which are part of the, if you like, the shopping basket of some of the poorest. But I think that if you were to say, just to please your own supporters, and most of all, your own backbenchers, for goodness sake, that, we've got to have tax cuts, I think this is pretty dodgy thinking at the moment and is likely in the end to discredit the government rather than benefit it. So, no, I will save the tax cuts for later. Yes, we want them. That's how the economy should be. But at the moment, we've got to help those who most need help.
Okay. Yeah.
Rory McCallion's the next voice you'll hear.
Yes, I was saying yes, but I agree with you largely, but it is a structural thing. And things like the splurge, I agree with Alan, that's just playing to the gallery. It is not.
He's saying cutting taxes is playing to the gallery as well, or a particular bit of the gallery that says I normally vote Tory.
Yes, and I agree that if you're just engaging in window dressing, you are not addressing the structural problems. Yeah. And part of the structural problems are, it's the cost of it. Now, the last time the oil was over $120 a barrel, it stimulated the fracking boom, which brought prices down quite dramatically and quite quickly. So getting those resources is the structural thing that will sort things out, and it will also help to provide the raw materials for the fertilizers and for things like microchip manufacture, which is coming down the road.
All right, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, so you've shifted the territory brilliantly to the last bit. I'm going to bring Alan back in to comment on what you just said and then broaden it out very slightly, because, again, I mean, you're referring to that era that we do, but I remember us meeting Sheikh Yamani when there were various oil crises and the rest of it. But let's just talk a little bit about supply-side stuff as well. Just put oil there and gasoline to one side just for a moment. Whether it is fracking, and there's political argument to be had over that, or Rolls-Royce ready-to-go mini nuclear power stations. That would be terrific stuff for British industry, but it does take time. Is this government, formed by the party that you are a member of and a supporter of, is it doing enough on the supply side agenda? Boris tends to talk about it occasionally, but doesn't tend to do a great deal about it. We want more goods made in Britain into the marketplace, deflating inflation and creating jobs. Would you like to see a more proactive agenda on the supply side, Alan?
Yes, I would. And I don't think it was doing that up till now. And to be fair, you know, we had 2 years of COVID, and now we've had the Ukraine invasion. I think that in terms of the sort of scale of priorities at the moment, where you have to balance the short term and the long term, the structural and, you know, the necessary, I think our first priority is to admit our moral obligation to help those who are most in need at the moment, because we have some unprecedented sudden pain. Part of the judgment call is how long the Ukraine conflict is going to last, and to what I was saying at the beginning about whether the step change upwards we've seen is going to continue going up, or whether we're now there, we've done that step change, and it's got to work its way through. Supply side stuff, yes, absolutely, but I think the lead time is longer than many people appreciate.
Absolutely.
And of course, we've got the continuing conflict of doing something on the fuel side whilst also wanting to decarbonise transport, the economy, and indeed the world.
Yeah. Alan, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Final point. I mean, absolutely on the money yet again. It's lead time.
Yes,
the people that you write about in that brilliant report are absolutely chomping at the bit to do it.
Oh, sure, absolutely they are. But I wanted to make a point about the lead time. Now, one thing we can do is decouple the link between wind power and gas. We're getting a lot of power from wind, and its prices are being linked to gas prices. Now, as far as I'm aware, the cost of fresh air has not actually gone up over the last few months, and yet I had a green tariff for electricity, and I was offered the renewal, and it was going to be more than double. There's no real justification for that, in my view. Decouple it, and create a proper market with competition between wind, gas, and oil, and that will have the effect of bringing energy prices down as well.
Which would help everybody.
It would.
Rory McCallion, it is always a pleasure to see you. And Alan Duncan, equally, you're very welcome to come on the programme any time and share your wisdom and your reflections. Thank you both very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Hope you found that useful as well. A little bit of background there, clearly, but also the things that should be done. And I hope that you reflect as well on what Sir Alan Duncan was saying there about any measures that are taken by the government. And let's look very closely at what the motivation is, as well as what the economic effect may be. So Sir Alan Duncan and Rory McCallion, thank you both very much indeed. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more coming up on today's programme. England's UEFA Nations League game takes place behind closed doors tonight, but after a lacklustre start to the competition, will they fight back and beat Italy? I'll be finding out more about that, but first let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, in the UK is looking a breezy day with showers mainly affecting northern and western parts of the UK. Let's take a look at the details. A breezy but mainly fine and dry afternoon across southwest England with plenty of sunny spells. However, there may be the odd showers. Temperatures will reach around 20 degrees Celsius. Across southeast England, it'll be generally dry with plenty of sunny spells, though there is a chance of the odd isolated shower. Across South Wales, a windy afternoon across the high ground and generally breezy elsewhere, with a mixture of sunny spells and some isolated showers. For northwest England, it will be breezy. There will be a mixture of sunny spells and showers, though these will be less frequent than this morning. Temperatures will reach around 19 degrees Celsius. A similar day across the Pennines in northeast England with strong winds, particularly over high ground. Though there will be some blustery showers, there will be plenty of sunny spells in between. A damp afternoon across southern Scotland with showers that could be heavy at times. However, there will be some sunny spells. Remaining windy though, this will ease later. For Northern Ireland, there'll be a mixture of sunny spells and frequent blustery showers, some of which could be heavy at times. Temperatures will reach around 17 degrees Celsius. Showers will continue across western parts of the UK this evening, though winds will slowly start to ease. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's 12:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Prince Charles has reportedly described the government's policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda as appalling. He's said to have made the comment during a private conversation, according to The Times. Clarence House insists he is politically neutral. It's after the High Court ruled the first deportation flight to the African nation can go ahead on Tuesday. Campaign groups are expected to appeal, with the case set to be heard on Monday. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a teenager was stabbed at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old boy's mother, who was also seriously injured, is now in a stable condition in hospital. Police believe the 44-year-old suspect is known to the victims. 3 people have been charged with the murder of Mohammed Shah Subani, whose body was found in a woodland in Beaconsfield. The 27-year-old was reported missing in May 2019 when he failed to return to his West London home. His remains were discovered 7 months later. The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help struggling families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell says dozens of people have to pay privately to get a prescription at a time when the cost of living is soaring. She says those aged 18 or under can access treatment, but older children are being forgotten. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Alistair.
Tamsin, thanks very much indeed. I watched Harry Kane score a penalty the other evening and then glanced at the league tables and blanched. Well, tonight England play their UEFA Nations League game facing rivals Italy, who I found were top of the league when in their group and England was down at the bottom. They last played in the Euro 2020 final, losing on penalties at Wembley. You see, there is some logic to my addled mind. The game being played at Molineux will not be seen by the crowds that would usually be expected following a two-match ban to the Football Association for unrest during the final of Euro 2020. It will instead take place behind closed doors. But will that lack of mass fan support have a negative impact on a already tricky match, or will it actually help Southgate's men win their first game of the tournament? Delighted to be joined now here live in the studio by a very good friend of mine and someone who does actually know what they're talking about rather than me just rambling having watched a penalty. It's the great sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee. Let's start off with that. I mean, I genuinely was quite shocked when Harry did his business, and that was great. I hadn't looked at the table before then. England are in a difficult position.
Yeah, look, it's the Nations League, so it's not like the most stellar tournament you can possibly get, but it'd be good to get to the latter tournament, to the latter stage of the tournament, which becomes a knockout. We last had this in 2019. It was postponed, obviously, for 2021 because we had to accommodate the Euros, but it was quite fun when England got to the semi-final last time. They got beaten by Holland, but nonetheless, it was... The reason they created the Nations League in the first place, Alistair, is because they wanted competitive football. Now, you can play a glamour friendly if you want, where the players don't touch each other. I mean, I remember there was one of them when Iceland played a warm-up for the World Cup in 2006, and they were told not to tackle against England because they don't want to see that. You want to see competitive. You want to see players, having contact sport. That's what it's about.
And for those listening to us on radio rather than watching on telly, we're running pictures of the squad training, and so even if it is all of that you've just said, it still matters. It's prestige, it's confidence.
Yes, it is, and also these are preparation games for the World Cup now. There's only 4 games left before England step out in Qatar. So even though it's November, there isn't a lot of football to be played. But the difference now is that international federations can go to the clubs and say, look, we know your players have played 60-odd games this season. Mason Mount's played 62 games for Chelsea this season. He's played other, as well as England commitments as well on top of that. He's probably played about 67 games. So you need to be able to entice them into a competitive match. If it's a friendly, they don't try a leg. They're thinking about the rest because they need their rest. It's not all cynical. It's about they need their rest. So that was the essence behind it. But whether it plays out in practice, we had Kevin De Bruyne, the great Belgian international midfielder, saying this week, he says glorified friendly. Yeah. So then it's easy to say that after you've been beaten 4-1 by Holland, of course.
You're so good. Such a brilliant segue too. Talking of which, Wales, of course, who are still cock-a-hoop about qualifying for World Cup entry, as you said just then.
Yes.
But also facing the mighty Belgium.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, again, Wales put everything into qualifying for... This is what the current schedule is throwing up because of COVID. You're playing a World Cup qualifier, one of the biggest games in your history on a Sunday. Yeah. And then on Wednesday, you're playing at home against... I can't remember who they played. They played at home to some... who was it? Ukraine, wasn't it? They got beaten by 2-1 So that
a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah, it's kind
more at stake than actual singing or football.
Scotland had it in reverse because they lost their playoff against Ukraine, and then if some of their top players decided to stay behind for the Nations League because they thought they want to make amends, and of course
Scotland are up against Ireland.
They are indeed. Yeah, that's going to be a decent game today. Both smarting after exits from the World Cup. I mean, Ireland have got no form whatsoever. I mean, there's lots of complaints that their manager, a League of Ireland background, he hasn't really got full professional status within the game. Mick McCarthy was the manager previously, a calibre operator, of course. So they're in a bit of a state of flux. It's not the side of 10, 20, 30 years ago when Jack Charlton was in charge, but they're still trying to build their way back up. It's difficult for these nations to do that, but they need competitive fixtures to entice their best players into playing. And just on the crowd thing tonight at Molineux, Wolverhampton Wanderers haven't hosted an England game since 1956. It's a shame that they can't have a full crowd in tonight. Yeah. England have a 2-match ban. One of them is suspended.
They're not going to let the kids in, and like in Hungary, and then suddenly the dads will accompany them.
Well, it's one dad one adult every 10 children. But having said that, Hungary go to Molineux to play England on Tuesday. So I'm
going to have to jump ahead because I'm being told we've got to move on because we've got to catch up with the news and stuff like that. But when I said we were having this conversation, I've got to talk about golf.
Yes.
Because that dollar Saudi thing has now crossed a crucial line in your view.
Yeah, it has. I mean, we saw players moving over in the last few weeks tentatively. Hitherto, they'd been players who were kind of past their peak. Solid Ryder Cup players like Lee Westwood and Ian Poulter, but guys who hadn't really won majors, but they're still stellar names. On Thursday, though, not only did the PGA say that you'd be suspended if you join the Live Tour, but also Bryson DeChambeau, 28 years old, US Open champion 2020, in the prime of his career, has decided to make that move. I think that could be a game changer, because then you'll see the McIlroys and everybody else trying to move over. Patrick Reed's already gone as well. He's a young man. He won the Masters recently. So I think just as we saw with the Premier League in the early 90s, just as we saw the darts in the early 90s and the Kerry Packer Circus in 1976, we could see some extreme movement on that. It could have repercussions for the sport.
All right, maybe we'll talk tomorrow about the football.
Absolutely,
when we've got stuff to reflect on as well. But for the time being, Aidan, always a real pleasure and an enlightenment. Thank you very much indeed. Aidan McGee there talking about footy and crucial developments in the world of golf. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon. The war in Ukraine continues. Alan Duncan talked about that in our very first segment. And another ghastly story has emerged from there. 2 Britons have been captured, tried in inverted commas, and sentenced to death. We'll be discussing that next with a top lawyer. And we'll be reflecting on the status of those 2 guys as to whether they are Ukrainian regulars or whether they are mercenaries. And upon that, a great deal hinges. You will want to hear what a top lawyer has to say about that right after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 12:42 here on GB News TV and radio. I suppose it's 12:42 everywhere, wherever you are in the United Kingdom at any rate. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. Amidst a seemingly endless flow of ghastly stories from the war in Ukraine, a rather complex and frightening one has emerged in the last couple of days. 2 Britons have been captured, tried, and I put that consciously in inverted commas, and sentenced to death. Aidan Aslin, who's 28, and Sean Pinner, who's 48, were convicted of taking action toward violent seizure of power at a court in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. They were accused of being mercenaries. They say they are Ukrainian regulars. The UK government accepts that and insists the judgment had no legitimacy and that the pair should be treated as prisoners of war. Joining me now to discuss all of that, not the rights and wrongs of invasions or any of the rest of it, but the legal arguments surrounding the fate of these 2 men is, and there he is, I'm delighted to say, Chris Daw, QC, a barrister and author of the book Justice on Trial. Chris, in a sense, this is a classic case where the rustic international law and international conventions are, to quote the title of your book back at you, on trial. What's your take?
Well, I think it's very straightforward. This court has absolutely no legitimacy. It's a court that's been set up by Russian-backed separatists within the territorial jurisdiction of the Republic of Ukraine, and it therefore has no more jurisdiction than if I were to set up a court at the cricket club where I happen to be at the moment and start handing out penalties and death sentences. There is no legitimacy to the verdict, and in fact, it doesn't matter from legal purposes whether or not they are mercenaries or were mercenaries or whether they were serving legitimately with the Ukrainian armed forces, because, as I say, the court itself has no jurisdiction. And now the fact that they have, as I understand it, been serving with the Ukrainian military, one in the Marines and one in another branch of the Ukrainian armed forces for some years, predating the Russian invasion, is important. It's significant in some ways, but it's not significant to whether or not this court has legitimacy in imposing the death penalty or anything else.
And just so that folk are crystal clear on that point, you're the lawyer, not me, I'm the mere journalist. That is because this state, the Donetsk People's Republic, has no status internationally. It's not recognised by the United Nations or any other country other than Russia.
No, absolutely. As I say, I mean, I know it's a ridiculous example, but I mean, people have historically declared independence over all sorts of territories, unless and until the international community recognise those territories as independent nations, then they can't act in the way that states can act, which is to impose sentences and to set up courts and constitutions and systems of justice. The truth of it is there isn't a constitution for this republic because it's not a real country. So these men really should be treated as prisoners of war. They should be treated humanely, and if they are executed, it will be an utter outrage. And I really hope that everybody in the international community will do everything they can to stop that happening.
Well, interestingly on that point, Chris, as well, and I'd be grateful for you to shine your brilliantly focused legal torch upon what I'm going to say next, because the Prime Minister himself has said to senior ministers, not least Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, I want every sinew strained to get these guys out and back to safety. But there's a kind of legal twist as well, isn't there? Because Russia doesn't say it's at war with Ukraine. It says it's a special military operation. And I am told that we, the Foreign Office, have to be quite careful how we treat this matter in terms of our diplomatic efforts and recognising who we do and who we don't. How complex is that, Chris?
Yes, it's very complex because it's only complex because of the way the Russians and the Donetsk, the Russian-backed Donetsk forces are behaving. But it is complex because if you think about it, the more that the British government presses various levers, the more the Russian government can say, well, they're British, they're not Ukrainian, and they must be mercenaries, therefore, because they shouldn't be fighting out here in Ukraine. So there's a really difficult kind of political balance for the government to tread. And sadly, I think the only thing that's likely to save these men's lives is likely to be a Russian political view that to execute two Britons is going to cause much more harm to Russia politically and in terms of world and international relations than to, for example, commute their sentences to life in prison, or what the Russians are really about here, let's be honest, is swapping these two people probably for 100 Russians who have been captured in Ukraine. The whole thing is political, and I feel desperately sad for these men and their family.
I'm going to lower the tone very slightly in my last question, but not in I hope not in a silly way, because in your past you have represented some very high-profile, very influential people. Full stop, no comment, just stating that as fact, which you'd be the first to acknowledge. Is there a role for people like that in this circumstance that gets the government here in the UK off the hook and the government in Moscow and the Kremlin off the hook, i.e. find somebody, whether it's a former oligarch or someone in this country who's got great cachet in Russia, to say, look, can I help? I'm going to strike a bargain here. I'm going to help you guys do a deal so that diplomatically and politically you don't embarrass yourselves.
Well, I mean, we've seen people like Roman Abramovich and various other sort of high-profile Russian individuals with a degree of influence in Russia trying to broker various peace initiatives and safe corridors for refugees and so on. Frankly, thus far, I've not seen any evidence of great success in any of those efforts. But if it were your son or your brother who were being held under a death sentence in Donetsk, I think you would just want anyone who could possibly contribute to this effort effort to do anything possible to get them released. But I'm afraid to say, in the end, I hope and trust that they will survive all of this. But I think in the end we'll pay a heavy price, and Russia will extract a heavy price for their release.
Well, there we go. You absolutely delivered what it says on the tin, Chris Storr, QC. That's exactly what I wanted. No politics. I wanted legal argument and fact, and you delivered brilliantly. I'm most grateful. Great to talk to you, Chris. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care, Alistair.
Chris Storr, and you, sir, QC, barrister and author of that brilliant book, Justice on Trial. Now, we began the programme talking about one aspect of the royal family, but last weekend we went big on our Jubilee celebrations, as indeed did the vast majority of you. You may think that this next item is a bit late to the game, but it's all about creating a long-lasting legacy of the Jubilee. It's even actually in the... where is it? I cut it out and kept it. Let me see if I can quickly find it. I think I probably can. Yes, so if you're listening to this conversation on radio, as I always say, rather than watching on television, here it is. It's on page 14 of the Express. Hope will defeat doommongers in the fight to save Earth. I particularly like that because I don't like being lectured to by people and people say, oh, we're all going to die. This is a brilliant, brilliant project that gets the job done without being doom-laden. I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with an old friend of mine who's intimately involved in this entire project. His name is Rupert Howell. He's the chair of a tech startup company called Pinwheel, and it is they who focus on making business planet conscious. They've been directly involved in the Platinum pageant in order to help make it a lasting and sustainable legacy. He's also the guy who said and created, as a successful businessman, "You've been tangoed." He's great company, he's a great friend, but here he's now being terribly serious and very grown up about the Jubilee, the legacy and the planet. Here's what he had to say. When we first met, you were running a highly successful advertising agency, and then our friendship developed and you became the commercial director of ITV plc, a huge job. But throughout your working life, bringing brands and people together has been in your bloodstream, as it were. This is in the charity sector to a degree. So tell me, first of all, about what Pinwheel is.
Well, funnily enough, it's bringing people and brands together. Yeah. And it's not actually a charity, it's a commercial operation, although what we're doing for the Platinum Jubilee is on a pro bono basis. And the idea, which incidentally wasn't mine, I'm very good at spotting other people's good ideas. I was very lucky to know a guy called Gavin Shepherd, whose idea it was, who's our chief executive. And what we spotted in the whole sort of sustainability universe is a sort of disengagement between consumers and the brands that were spending the money to get to net zero. And the idea behind Pinwheel is actually to connect brands back to the consumers. And we do that by the corporations or the events like the pageant come to us, and we then allow either their customers, their employees, their dealers or their ticket holders to decide where that money goes, and therefore they're engaged in the process.
It's like a little bit like corporate social responsibility, particularly amongst young people. If they know that a company or a brand is doing the right thing about stuff that matters to them, then they're more likely to trade with and consume with that brand.
So correct. And actually it's got to the stage now where I'm told by sort of younger friends of mine who run businesses that they can't employ the most talented people unless they can answer those questions. And unless those people are somehow engaged in it, they don't just want to know that the company's doing something, they want to be involved in what the company does. And one of the things we've done in Pinwheel is it's not just about offsetting. What we're adding in is the presence of a positive. So in all of our projects, there's an element of biodiversity or other sort of additives, and we call it planet repair, which is much more than just carbon removal. And that's what impressed the pageant, because what they wanted is the British public to get involved in creating a sustainability legacy that wasn't just about offsetting, but was about something good for the future. And that's how we selected the 3 charities that people can get to vote on.
But the big leap, particularly this weekend, is that connection with the Jubilee and the pageant. Your idea, their idea, the team's idea?
We took the idea to the pageant and said, look, there's this glorious event taking place to cap off, if you like, the glorious weekend. But wouldn't it be great if there was a lasting legacy from it? It wasn't just sort of over at midnight on Sunday kind of thing. And they loved that idea. Let's let the British public choose where that sustainability legacy goes. Now, we didn't want to make it too complicated, so we've selected 3 projects, 3 charities that sort of meet the criteria of both being helping carbon offset, but also much more than that. They're adding biodiversity and positive life elements. And so that people can choose from those, and that's how they get engaged in the process.
So they can't choose a project or an individual that they think they'd like in the list?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
They can add to it. How do they do that?
So they vote for one of the 3 projects.
Yeah.
So if they go on to www.pinwheel.earth/platinum pageant, if they go onto that, they get then presented with the 3 choices. So there's Brian May's Save Me Trust, which is a fabulous, what he's doing with his fortune is rewilding and putting biodiversity back into parts of Britain where it's needed. The second, obviously, is the Queen's Green Canopy, because it's a lovely idea, the idea of planting more trees to outlast not just the Queen, but you and me. And then finally, it's a cycling charity called Wheels for Wellbeing, who are helping disabled people get onto cycling and getting involved in cycling, which obviously is a good thing in terms of carbon emission. And in fact, that was the pageant actually selected the projects in collaboration with us. And they were particularly keen on that one as well. And I love that. I think it's a great charity.
But are either the Prince of Wales or any other members of the royal family directly connected with it? Because a lot of them have got a high profile on wanting to do the kind of stuff. I mean, Harry, not least, on the Commonwealth canopy, but also Charles. Lovely pictures of him planting trees up at Balmoral with his mum.
They're not directly involved, but they're aware of it.
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of the Pinwheel philosophy accords with what Prince William has been doing in terms of his environmental programme, where he is looking at not just carbon reduction, but planet repair and positive biodiversity moves. So they're very pro it, but they're not directly involved. This is run through the pageant organisation.
I thought one of the most interesting things that the Queen herself has said recently about the environment was at the time of COP26, where she did actually say, I like it when they talk the talk, but I wish they'd get on with it as well.
Well, we were there at COP26 and we soft-launched Pinwheel at COP26. That really helped us, what she said there. And I think the mood coming out of COP26 was, yeah, all this talk and all the scaremongering is one thing, but you've got to do something about it. And I learned one lesson in advertising above all else, which is negativity gets you attention, but positivity gets you action.
Yes.
OK, so we've had all the negativity and attention, all the scaremongering. This is, incidentally, is the mistake that a lot of the Extinction Rebellion crew are making, however well-intentioned, is that negativity certainly gets attention, certainly gets column inches and minutes on the screen, but it actually quite often doesn't lead to action because people close up in the face of negativity. What we're doing with Pinwheel and what the pageant is doing through us is real positivity, and that's what gets people to effect change.
The last question I want to ask you, it nods back to what I said at the beginning. When you look at the state of the UK economy, has it become a lot trickier now for bright young men and women who've got a great idea to start a business than when you started the agency all those years ago?
I think the only thing that's harder is raising funds right now. So fundraising,
despite interest rates and all that?
Fundraising is difficult right now. I mean, as soon as you get into a febrile economic situation and indeed political situation, then investors become risk averse. So it is harder to raise money. In many senses, it's easier to start a business now than it was when I was a young man, because you've got the internet and a lot of routes to market that don't carry huge capital costs. There's also a fantastic entrepreneurial spirit in this country. And I think if people can release that more and more and more, in fact, probably one of the best things that came out of lockdown was how many people did say, actually, I'm going to start my own business when I come out of it. The opportunity to start your own business has never been greater.
They're a great generation, aren't they?
They're a great generation. I'm very confident about the future. I really am.
Two old friends, both dads, chatting and reminiscing. Now, more importantly, to learn more about the brilliant enterprise that Rupert was just describing, head over to www.pinwheel.earth/platinum pageant. Also, the Express article is genuinely well worth reading. The results of the competition that Rupert was talking about will be announced very, very soon, and I do believe it is a wonderful idea. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. We've lots more coming up on the show this afternoon in our second hour, including more on those rising fuel prices. That right after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, it's 1 minute past 1 and a very warm welcome indeed if you have just joined us. If you've been with us since 12, thank you very much indeed. Welcome back. I'm Alastair Stewart and we are into the final hour of the programme. I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio. We've plenty more still to come, including more on our top discussions of the day, the cost of living and that petrol price and diesel price problem. We'll hear what you think and we'll also have my take. But first, let's get the very latest news. Here's Tamsin Roberts.
Alistair, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Prince Charles has reportedly described the government's policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda as appalling. He's said to have made the comment during a private conversation, according to The Times. Clarence House insists he is politically neutral. It's after the High Court ruled the first deportation flight to the African nation can go ahead on Tuesday. Campaign groups are expected to appeal, with the case set to be heard on Monday. Conservative MP John Whittingdale told GB News he thinks the policy is sensible and meets all its objectives.
The people who will be sent to Rwanda are young males who are economically active, where there is a shortage in Rwanda. There is not in this country. We have problems being created by the level of migration. In Rwanda, they want to have migrants, and the people trying to get to this country do so because they want to be economically active and to be able to earn money, which they will be able to do. So on the basic policy, I have no great difficulty. I think it meets a number of objectives. The court ruling yesterday, I would hope also, is a recognition that Parliament decided that it favoured this policy, and it is for Parliament to decide and not for the courts.
Royal commentator Jenny Bond says Prince Charles shouldn't be compared to the Queen.
For one, woke up this morning and saw those headlines and thought, good for you, Charles. That's just great. You've come out and you've said what you think, albeit privately, but Clarence House is not denying it. I think they would deny it if these conversations had not been had. And maybe Charles wanted his views to be known. He's a compassionate man. I know he is. He's a deep-thinking, philosophical man of great sentiment, and I think he feels strongly about this.
A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a teenager was stabbed at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old boy's mother, who was also seriously injured, is now in a stable condition in hospital. Police, who've described the attack in the Miles Platting area as ferocious, believe the 44-year-old suspect is known to the victims. 3 people have been charged with the murder of a father whose remains were found in a woodland in Beaconsfield. Mohammed Shah Subani was reported missing in May 2019 when he failed to return to his West London home. The 27-year-old's body was discovered 7 months later. The accused are due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today. Brazilian police searching for a missing British journalist have found what appears to be human remains in the Amazon River. Dom Phillips and Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Police are reportedly focusing their investigation on illegal fishermen and poachers. The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help struggling families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell says dozens of people have to pay privately to get a prescription at a time when the cost of living is soaring. She says those aged 18 or under can access treatment, but older children are being forgotten.
These mothers and fathers that are nursing them are absolutely exhausted, and they are having to budget really tightly simply because the cost of living crisis that we're in now has really took a grip on them. So I would like to appeal to Sajid, the Health Secretary, to extend RESCAS for these forgotten children over 18.
Interest rates for student loans will be capped for a year to protect against soaring inflation. Borrowers were facing a 12% rate at the end of the summer, but from September that's being cut to 7.3%. The Department for Education says it's the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record. Calls for a new salt and sugar tax are expected to be rejected in the latest government food strategy to be published on Monday. A leaked paper suggests that ministers will leave out key recommendations from a major review. The report had called for a sugar and salt tax as part of efforts to transform the nation's diet and to protect the environment. The government is expected to accept most of the report's recommendations. 1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to make ends meet for even 1 month if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association says a quarter of people also believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months amid the ongoing cost of living crisis. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to Alistair.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. 7 minutes past 1, and we're going to continue our conversation about the increase in the cost of living with those that have the experience and the ideas to suggest the best way out of it. Arguably, one of the biggest costs that we all face day to day is food and petrol. With some major supermarkets now selling petrol, I wanted to speak to a former supermarket chief executive on prices and profits and get his take upon it. But also, intriguingly, for someone who used to run a company that relied on a lot more electricity than some shops because it was Iceland, I think he has a bit to say about all of that. I'm delighted to say that my next guest is indeed Bill Grimsey, and there he is, former CEO of Iceland. Bill, good of you to join us. The price of everything that your old company sells is rising. The cost of delivering it to you is rising. How worried are you and your successors about that scenario?
Well, I think we're in the middle of a perfect storm, Alistair. We've had the Ukraine war, we've had the pandemic, And we're coming out of a situation where we need good policies in order to safeguard the nation from this cost of living crisis. And we've got some big challenges ahead as a country in order to do that. And I think the main challenges are around fuel and the cost of living at home and heating your homes, is a big challenge. And I think we need some radical thoughts going on. I'm personally get very angry when I have to switch my electricity and gas in order to get the right prices. I just think that the privatisation of that resource to the nation was a mistake, and here we are now faced with these rising prices and having to get help from the government. And when it comes to running supermarkets with the enormous costs that are involved in the infrastructure that you have to build to import products, store products, get them to stores, etc., against a background where the market's moving more and more online as well, so you're having to deliver to houses, the costs associated with that are huge. And I think that a good food strategy for the government to adopt would have been to help the nation through this process with quite a lot of things, like, for example, free school meals for people up and down the country, which are, children going without food is not acceptable in this rich nation.
One of your first senior management roles was as Tesco's customer services director. I completely understand that analysis that you just gave, and it chimed with a lot of what Sir Alan Duncan, the former Tory minister, was saying earlier on the programme as well. A sense of anger and a sense of the need for better policies to be in place. But are you sensing, Bill, that customers out there are getting restive? They feel that there's not a lot they can do. They've got to heat their homes. They've got to drive their motor cars. Truckers have got to deliver goods in their lorries. They feel disempowered.
I think that's absolutely right, Alistair. When you've got an economy today where the leaders are saying we want to make it an economy where you get high wages in high-tech jobs, etc., it's ignoring the fact that an awful lot of people in this country have to provide services to us in order to work. So we all know about the NHS, we know about transport, but, supermarkets are full of checkout operators, people who work overnight to fill up these shelves, etc. And it's a business where if you're not able to maintain those people's wages in line with an inflation, you're going to lose people. And that's what's happened. And it's going to be tough for these supermarkets to maintain the services that they've established at a time when this country has too many supermarkets anyway. I mean, we have far too much supermarket floor space. I'm not going to talk about brands, strengths and weaknesses, etc., but there's just plainly too many shops. So that's a good thing for your listeners that are worried about prices going forward, because as soon as volumes start to drop, then they're going to get more competitive with each other to attract that slice of the cake that they
when you see, Bill, a huge American venture capital private equity group spending billions on buying Morrisons, it's not because they want to be at the forefront of retail. You know that they think it's time to squeeze the asset and flog off some of the estate.
Oh, absolutely, Alistair. You've really hit a sore note with me here. I mean, I thought the sale of Morrison, poor old Ken would be turning in his grave today, and I knew Ken Morrison. Look, that's a vulgar situation. There is absolutely no added value coming from that purchase to the customers or the employees or the other stakeholders in Morrison's. What's actually going to happen is that there's going to be asset stripped to take out the assets. Now, this was a company run by a tight Yorkshireman, and so he owned everything. Okay, and so the property is in there is huge, and I was very outspoken when they were rumours of its sale that this is what would happen, and they actually CDNR, I think it is, said we won't sell any properties. Well, it only took 6 weeks before they announced the first £500 million parcel, and what is that doing for our economy? What is that doing for our challenges that we face as a nation? Nothing. It's actually just making a lot of individual people very rich. That's all. But that's a different point to the question you asked.
It is, but I tell you what, Bill, what you just said there was so enlightening for folk who don't know what's going on out there, very often in the hands of venture capitalists and private equity. So I didn't interrupt for a moment because I, A, agree with you, and B, it was fascinating. Final question, it's like running through your CV, but it's such an impressive CV that it's worth it. You also ran Wix for a while. And here's the flip side of a point you made earlier on when you said, and Alan Duncan made exactly the same point, we really do need to find ways of helping those who are most in need. You cited school dinners. Alan Duncan was talking about the money that the Chancellor has been able to give to the very poorest to pay their bills. But here's the point, Bill, as well. Are we doing enough to help ourselves? Are we thinking frugally when we have to? Are we doing DIY, going to Wix, buying stuff, or other competitors are available, B&Q and the rest of it, and doing stuff ourselves, just trying to save a bit of money to get through as well, rather than looking over the shoulder the whole time saying, where's the government, where are the other taxpayers to bail me out? What do you reckon?
I don't think we are doing enough. I think there's a generation of DIYers out there that haven't really started. If you go back to the 90s and changing rooms, when I was running Wix, people were into DIY. They wanted to improve their homes. If you look at what happened in the noughties and beyond, we became BIYers. So we bought it and gave it to some tradesman to do, and the interest in it changed. Now, here we are faced with a perfect storm, post-pandemic, post-Brexit. What we need is from our government is leadership that says, let's dig for victory, let's fix our homes, let's look after our nation and our children and feed them, and let's come out of this together rather than the kind of wishy-washy stuff that's going on. I mean, the fact that they've actually apparently rejected doing anything about sugar and salt in our diets from the report, the Dimblebury report, is absolutely appalling. When I was a lad, Alistair, sportsmen used to advertise cigarettes. So guess what? We all smoked in the 60s. And it's the worst thing that could ever happen to us. And eventually, governments, it took them like nigh on 40 years before we got to where we are today, where they're hidden and they're not advertised, etc., etc. Are we going to wait that long with obesity? Are we going to continue to allow these products to be advertised? And where is the health of the nation? So I think this is a perfect opportunity for the right visionary leadership to stand up and do the right things. And Dig for Victory would be one of those. Fix your homes, put your insulation in, let's all pull together and come out the other end of this. That's what we need. And unfortunately, we're not getting it.
Well, we'll watch this space with great interest, and I'm a joy to meet you and talk with you, Bill. Thank you very much indeed. A conversation to be continued anytime you fancy it. I'd love to do it. Bill Grimsey, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
Bill there, businessman, former CEO of Iceland and indeed of Wix and many other things. Also a turnaround expert, so it'd be interesting to see if we popped him in charge of one or two of the departments of state. There's an interesting thought, isn't it? Hope you found that interesting and helpful to understand this cost of living crisis and what can and cannot be done. Don't forget what he said there at the end as well. There's a lot you can do to help yourselves. Now, the cost of housing is another key part of this cost of living crisis, whether it's rising rents or whether it's rising house prices if you're trying to buy a house or move to a house that will accommodate perhaps a bigger family. If you're watching on television, listening on radio, let me explain if you're listening on radio, that's Michael Gove. He is the Levelling Up Secretary, but last week he was more the Housing Secretary, as it were, and he unveiled with the Prime Minister, or perhaps maybe reheated, the policy of allowing folk in housing associations to buy their own homes, with the added spice of saying that folk on housing benefit could use that money to pay for a mortgage if they could get a mortgage. It was met with, I guess, mixed responses. Not least the need for more house building. Certainly was the argument that if you do sell off, as in the era of Margaret Thatcher, a council house, then it needs to be replaced. In Thatcher's era, it wasn't replaced, and that caused a decade of difficulties for those that couldn't buy their own but did need social housing. So at least this time, Gove has said, no, we're going to get that right this time. If a housing association home is sold, it must be replaced. What's more, many working people commenting upon that package who are struggling themselves to pay for their mortgages expressed real anger at folk who are on benefit getting more help than them. So it is a complicated area of policy, and I'm delighted to be joined now by Chris Worrell, who is the editor of the Red Brick blog and also the host of the Priced Out podcast, which I think ticks two of the boxes that I alluded to there in my introduction. Good to see you there, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. Overall, what do you make of this extension, first of all, of the right to buy policy? I understood and reported on the Thatcher-era policy of people buying their own council homes. It was socially revolutionary, but it did leave a bit of a tricky legacy that Gove this time has consciously tried to sort out. What's your take?
Hi, Alistair. Well, let's be honest, the right to buy first came along in the early 1980s, but it was originally a Labour Party policy proposal launched in the 1959 Hugh Gates School Manifesto. So it was taken by Thatcher. It's probably been one of the biggest transfers of wealth to the sort of working class, and it's been taken up by 1.9 million households. It's had met with criticism, as you pointed out. You've had Guido Fawkes, a stupid idea, and Shelter saying we should be building, not selling off social housing. But the pilot study that we've seen, it's from February 2021. The report was made on a pilot in Midlands. They reckon it would achieve only 17,000 sales per year. And if it's not going to be doing a one-for-one replacement, if it goes along with what's found in that report, it will be doing, for every two sold, one will be built. And we need at least 300,000 homes to be built. That's Priced Out's position on the housing crisis. And it's trimming around the edges. But ultimately, it's it should be welcomed as a transfer of wealth to the working class.
I understand that completely, and thank you for correct. We've got tricky problems with the picture there. Is it going to stabilise? Look at ugly me and we'll... there he is. No, he's back. That's fine. And thank you for correcting me on the Gateskill point. I genuinely didn't know that. And we'll return to it and read up on it. But that is intriguing. So the argument there basically is Gove has said what he said, but hold his feet to the fire. I've got that loud and clear. The other thing, my friend Darren McCaffrey at the press conference asked the Prime Minister, isn't the simple answer to all of this to build more houses as you promised in your manifesto? And the Prime Minister was seen to go a bit cold on that. Is that because it's not the answer, or because he realises that governments don't build houses, governments create circumstances in which builders build houses?
Well, I think it's clear that the Tory government has bottled it on planning reform. This was ultimately what's needed to be able to build the houses we need. At the minute, we have a system beholden to NIMBYism, so those that sort of practice the not in my backyard ethos, and they lock our communities in amber. And ultimately, until planning reform is back on the table, any of these measures, whether it's demand side or pumping money into the supply side, it's still going to be stuck in this system that we need to change. And planning reform is the ultimate form that we need to take in terms of those changes. And it should be a coalition around this, whether it's Labour or the Conservative Party. We really need to appreciate that all the research, the body of evidence, points towards this. London School of Economics researchers showing it by Professor Christine Hilber. It's all there for us to know. We know what the policy solution is to build more homes and to free it up for our planning system changes.
And to cut to the chase on that point, Chris, you're basically saying we're going to build anyway, whether you like it or not, and we're going to restructure the planning rules so that it will happen, because that is the core answer. Stop dancing around on the head of a pin.
Absolutely. And the IMBY movement, the SMI back movement, is now exploding. People are just fed up of not being able to afford a home. They're fed up of not being able to get on the housing ladder. And they're fed up of having to point left, right and centre as who's to blame. But we know who they are, and it's the politicians. not getting around planning reform. And that's what we need to do.
All right, Chris, I'm sorry that we had, for those who were watching us on telly, a little bit of difficulty there with some of the pictures, but we heard the arguments loud and clear, and we'll reflect upon them, and let's continue the conversation another time as well. But for now, Chris Worrell, editor of the Red Brick blog, and also his own podcast, Priced Out. Look him up, follow the arguments, agree with him, disagree with him, but he knows what he's talking about. So to him, thank you very much indeed. Now, we have one or two items still to come. It's ticking up towards 24 minutes past 1, so let's bring you up to date with the weather forecast.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, in the UK is looking a breezy day with showers mainly affecting northern and western parts of the UK. Let's take a look at the details. A breezy but mainly fine and dry afternoon across southwest England with plenty of sunny spells. However, there may be the odd showers. Temperatures will reach around 20 degrees Celsius. Across southeast England, it'll be generally dry with plenty of sunny spells, though there is a chance of the odd isolated shower. Across South Wales, a windy afternoon across the high ground and generally breezy elsewhere, with a mixture of sunny spells and some isolated showers. For northwest England, it will be breezy. There will be a mixture of sunny spells and showers, though these will be less frequent than this morning. Temperatures will reach around 19 degrees Celsius. A similar day across the Pennines in northeast England with strong winds, particularly over high ground. Though there will be some blustery showers, there will be plenty of sunny spells in between. A damp afternoon across southern Scotland with showers that could be heavy at times. However, there will be some sunny spells. Remaining windy, though, this will ease later. For Northern Ireland, there'll be a mixture of sunny spells and frequent blustery showers, some of which could be heavy at times. Temperatures will reach around 17 degrees Celsius. Showers will continue across western parts of the UK this evening, though winds will slowly start to ease. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's exactly 27 minutes past 1, and you are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, TV and radio, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Now, the government, it was alluded to, funnily enough, in a previous interview, but let me remind you that the government is expected to ignore and reject plans that have been put forward by the great Henry Dimbleby to introduce a new salt and sugar tax in England next week. Now, take you back, there was also the great Camilla Cavendish back in the days of Cameron, who also proposed it. So clearly something is going on about salt and sugar tax, and the government, whether it was Cameron's or Johnson's, don't want to do it. The paper that comes forward is, as I said, from Henry Dimbleby, and it recommended taxing the salt and sugar used in most processed foods, in restaurants indeed, and in professional catering. It is said, however, that Boris Johnson's already called the plans, I quote, unattractive, but does health outweigh politics and economics? Interesting point. I'm delighted now to be joined by weight loss expert and nutritionist Kim Pearson. And there she is. Kim, thank you so much for joining us. I just alluded to, in my introduction to you, that literally about 5 minutes ago we had Bill Grimsey on, who is a former CEO of Iceland, the food chain, saying that he thought it was most unfortunate if the Prime Minister backed away from this salt and sugar tax, because he thought it was a good idea. You're a nutritionist and a keep fit person. What's your view?
I absolutely agree. It's so disappointing that repeatedly commissioned reports have been presented to the government and they have just not taken the action that has been recommended. We know that high sugar foods, ultra processed foods and refined carbohydrates are the foods that are responsible for driving poor metabolic health and obesity, and more needs to be done to clamp down on the manufacturing, marketing and advertising of these ultra processed and high sugar foods.
But also, I'm going to play devil's advocate slightly. We also live in a country, and I personally celebrate it, as indeed I'm sure do you, and I know for a fact that Bill Grimsey does as well. I'd like to make my own choices. I don't like being bludgeoned into a particular policy that may be right or may be wrong purely by taxation. I mean, everyone is suffering enough in the cost of living crisis right now. If I was in the Treasury, I think I might delay anything that was going to add to tax rather than cut it.
I'm absolutely with you on freedom of choice. Everybody should have the choice. But unfortunately, you have a lot of the population who are really struggling to put food on the table at the moment. Yeah. And the food that is the most accessible and most affordable is high sugar, ultra processed foods. And so if we do put a tax on these sorts of foods, then I would absolutely want to see the money raised from taxation put towards subsidising healthier food and also supporting people from an education perspective, because we have generations now of families who don't know how to cook food from scratch. So we really need to be raising money to put into subsidising healthier options and supporting people with making more healthy home-cooked foods.
Absolutely. I'm delighted that we found common ground on that one. And because I don't dispute, you're the expert, I am not, but I can see the logic of it. I know the impact that salt has on blood pressure, and I know the impact that sugar has on weight and all the rest of it. I know that bit. But if you cast your mind back to the coronavirus at its height, this government spent millions and millions on public service advertising, saying, keep your distance, wash your hands, do all of that other stuff, which most of us did, and we were nudged into it. And some of the ads were dreadful, but some of them were crystal clear because they did explain about transmission and so on and so forth. It seems to me if you can find the money to do it during the coronavirus, you can find the money right now to do it without putting a tax. Say, we can only do the adverts because we've got the money from taxing sugar and salt. Just find the money and tell us, look, do the sensible thing. Then we can make a judgment of our own free will without seeing taxes go up. I think you've got a brilliant compromise there.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I was saying this throughout the pandemic.
Yeah.
Between 2014 and 2015, the NHS spent an estimated £6.1 billion treating obesity and obesity-related health issues. So this is an investment. We need to put money into supporting people to live healthier lives and achieve metabolic health, better metabolic health, in order to save money in the long run. And I totally agree with you. We found the money for all of this campaigning during the pandemic. Why can't we find the money to do anything about it now?
Yeah. Final point. I was reflecting on this when I knew that you and I would be chatting, because I can remember John Reid, who's a very, very dear friend of mine, when he was Health Secretary 20, 30 years ago, saying, look, the real answer to all of this is to get kids in schools to eat more fruit and less snack bars and go into McDonald's and so on. We're almost running out of celebrities that we've tried. We have Jamie Oliver, you know, with Twizzlers and all the rest of it. Henry Dimbleby, who is the great David Dimbleby's son, and runs the brilliant Leon, or used to run the brilliant Leon restaurant chain. These are famous people who know what they're talking about, but Joe and Joanna Public are not getting that. Who do we need to get this message across, and how urgent is it, genuinely, from a health point of view? Final point.
It's hugely urgent. I am a nutritionist. I specialise in weight loss, and every week in my clinic, I see people whose health and quality of life is compromised because of the dietary choices that they've made. So we need to do something urgently. And you can bring in celebrities. They may have a moderate short-term impact, but we need the government to take action to make sure that there is sustained commitment to supporting people with making healthier diet and lifestyle choices.
Kim, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Balanced wisdom there from Kim Pearson, weight loss expert and nutritionist. Talk to you again soon, I hope, very much. It is now 28 minutes to 2. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've lots more in that final half hour or so this afternoon, including be speaking to someone who is a very good friend of mine who drives lorries for a living and really does know about the cost of living crisis from his own business point of view, but also, more importantly, bringing food and stuff to you. So I look forward to talking to him in a little while. But first of all, let's bring you right up to date with the news.
Good afternoon, it's 1:34. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Prince Charles has reportedly described the government's policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda as appalling. He's said to have made the comment during a private conversation. That's according to The Times. Clarence House insists he is politically neutral. It's after the High Court ruled the first deportation flight to the African nation can go ahead on Tuesday. Campaign groups are expected to appeal, with the case set to be heard on Monday. The family of Sean Pinner, who was given a death sentence for fighting Russian forces in Ukraine, says they are devastated. He and another British man, Aidan Aslin, were found guilty of mercenary activities by a court in the separatist region of Donetsk. The Prime Minister's ordered ministers to do everything in their power to secure their release in what's being described as a sham verdict. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a teenager was stabbed at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old boy's mother, who was also seriously injured, is now in a stable condition in hospital. Police believe the 44-year-old suspect is known to the victims. 3 people have been charged with the murder of Mohammed Shah Subani, whose body was found in a woodland in Beaconsfield. The 27-year-old was reported missing in May 2019 when he failed to return to his West London home. His remains were discovered 7 months later. The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help struggling families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell says dozens of people have to pay privately to get a prescription at a time when the cost of living is soaring. She says those aged 18 or under can access treatment, but older children are being forgotten. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB plus radio. Don't go anywhere. Alistair will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 2 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. Now, you have been getting in touch on several of our big topics of the day, but the Rwanda migrant ruling and Prince Charles' private conversations have really grabbed you in a big way. I'm going to start with Percy, who says, I don't like the fact that the Home Secretary lied about the UN supporting the Rwanda policy, which is in breach of international law. Why should anyone be comfortable with that? We risk being made into a global pariah. Well, it's interesting if you want to read up the ruling, Percy, to find out who the judge believed in that situation. Bob comes along via email as well. Changes the subject from the legal ruling and goes back to Prince Charles himself and says Prince Charles has plenty of room in his many properties. Perhaps he could house and support a few thousand migrants. And finally, Patricia, who says the heir apparent should not be showing his political leanings. No one knows his mother's political ideas. Thank you for those, and do keep them coming because we'll have a few more right at the very end of the programme. Right, now... Oh, by the way, do subscribe as well to our YouTube channel, GB News, in case you missed any of those conversations. And if you're interested in the Prince of Wales and his arguments, then you will want to see the Jenny Bond interview that we did at the very top of the programme. Let us, however, now return to our top story, the cost of living crisis and the price of fuel, which is, of course, at its very heart. And I'm delighted to be joined now by a good friend of this programme and of mine, the motoring journalist and transport campaigner, Quentin Wilson. And there he is. The story that hit me most, Quentin, to make me think, blimey, we really are in a mess, was when the AA itself now says only make journeys that are absolutely essential. All well and good, the rail strike's going to make that even more difficult. Do you have an answer?
The only answer we have in the short to medium term, Alistair, is for the government to cut fuel duty and VAT. They need to do this really quickly because we have a fuel price emergency. We've never had this kind of apocalyptic situation before, and a combination of geopolitical factors that has forced the price of fuel up and oil up, and will continue to do so. So the government and the Treasury has made quite a bit out of the rise in VAT and the rise in duty with the rise of prices. So they've got a bit of headroom to cut VAT and to cut duty, because if they don't, we have these serious problems about growth, about people's quality of lives, not being able to get to schools, hospitals, supermarkets, doctors, jobs, all this sort of stuff. And everything we buy, as I think we'll hear later on, everything we buy in our shops travels by road, by a diesel truck. So it's a major economic hit unless we do something about it.
Let me put to you, just for comment, because, as I said, you specialise as a motoring journalist, but you also write about the motoring industry, manufacturing side of it, as well as cars and driving. The counter-argument is we've got to be careful about this because there are the nation's finances to worry as well. Any cut in VAT or any cut in fuel duty has to be funded from something else, or something's got to go.
Yeah, look, absolutely, and we've been through the pandemic, and we've had a huge hit to the national finances. But this is the most serious thing that could happen to the economy, because it will grind to a halt, and you'll get real social unrest if people aren't able to travel. We've got summer coming, we're out of lockdown, people want to have a life again, and if they can't afford to use their cars, this is really seismic. And I go back to the central point about growth. You will have no growth whatsoever, and high fuel prices increase inflation, they increase interest rates, or we all have to pay more because of mortgages. And it just is a vicious spiral. And if you look down the line to the rest of this year and maybe next year, we could be looking at $150 to $175 a barrel. It's currently $121. So you could be seeing nearly £3 a litre. So we have to do something right now. Otherwise, any thoughts of an economic recovery, well, you can tow those out to sea and sink them with gunfire.
Beautifully put. You also, as I say, that's the economic and the political stuff, but writing about the joy and pleasure of driving, a little bit like the AA tip saying, only make the journey if you have to make it. Are there things that can make that £100 tank of petrol or diesel go further? The reason I ask you that is I was saying to the guy who used to run Iceland, are there things that we could do that we're not yet doing to help ourselves in terms of freezing food, cook a little bit more than you really need, but freeze some of it, DIY rather than going to shop and this? When it comes to driving, are there things that we could do to be slightly more economic and help cut the cost of getting from A to B if we still need to get from A to B?
You could cut the cost of all your fuel consumption, Alistair, by as much as 25% if you really concentrate. If you plan ahead and you don't race up to traffic lights on the throttle, you can see where traffic is slowing down ahead, so you lift off the throttle. You don't stab the pedals like a prize fighter. You drive gently. You keep your fuel down by keeping your speed down. Don't drive around with a boot full of junk or a roof box. And just be sort of moderate and gentle. And most cars these days have a trip computer on them where it tells you what your MPG is, your miles per gallon. So switch that on and then start to look at the savings you will make on your average fuel consumption just by driving carefully and circumspectly. It's all about speed. It's all about not braking too much, because as soon as you brake, you destroy the energy that you've just created with the accelerator pedal, and that energy is getting so expensive. So just anticipate the road ahead and gently roll up to junctions, and don't drive like a nutcase.
Absolutely fascinating. And you said before you gave those brilliant examples of how to do it, you said potentially save 25%.
25%. Yeah. This is what I've done. I used to do this several years ago, where you would take two cars and just drive carefully. And the saving is up to 25% if you're really, really good. And some of these, they call them hyper millers, which are people who really do know how to do this. They can save even more and take the consumption of a Range Rover from 25 mpg to maybe 45 or 50. So they can sometimes even double it. So it's a real achievable outcome if you're just careful. The big problem, though, Alistair, is that we're de-skilled when it comes to driving as a nation. And I think we need to understand, and this needs to be taught more, how you can save petrol.
Yeah, brilliant. Because also the Iceland guy made the point that, when times are so comfortable, we forget about DIY. You just go down the shop and buy it. But when times are tight, you have to do the sensible thing. Final point, and again, because we've known each other for a long time and you've written about this stuff for so long. Alan Duncan, who used to be in the oil industry and a former minister, said on the programme, look, don't get too despondent, because this is a passing phase. We'll bounce out of it and oil prices will come down again perhaps next year and it'll be OK. Are you as optimistic as him, or are you a bit more like me thinking, hang on a minute, I think we've maybe moved into a new era of high energy prices?
Yeah, persistent energy inflation, Alistair, is here to stay. And you've got situations like the fact that, more people are driving electric cars. So the oil-producing nations have seen that there is a drop in consumption. That's going to continue. I mean, I've got an electric car, and to drive 120 miles to London costs me less than £10.
Yeah.
It's really, really great. And that's the real answer to it. But we're seeing that kind of reduction. It's kind of demand destruction, which is happening. There's been underinvestment in oil and drilling because of what's known as ESG, so environmental, social, and governance investors who don't want to invest in the oil industry. So that's cut back capacity. So you're not going to see, lots and lots of oil in the next, decade or so. It's going to be less and less and less. Yeah. The excess capacity in the world for oil is about 2%. A hugely thin margin for error. If there's a hurricane in Mexico or something like that, it's all going to go horribly wrong. So get used to high oil prices.
Quentin, wise advice, but don't forget for a moment what Quentin said at the beginning of the conversation. You can save 25% of your petrol and diesel bill just by doing the sensible thing, and he's written about it. Look him up and follow him. He's brilliant. Quentin, always great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time this Saturday. Quentin Wilson there, motoring journalist and fuel campaigner. Now, you've been in touch on that cost of living and fuel crisis, sending in your emails and your tweets. Susie says, I suppose the real discussion here is if the fuel price is cut, what else has to go to pay for the shortfall? Should we get help with heating bills or money to clear the NHS backlog, etc.? Interesting point. Kind of what I was saying earlier on, and thank you for chipping that in. Perry says, fuel to hit £2 a litre as employers are advising employees work from home to save costs of extortionate fuel and rail costs. Number 10 are not happy. Raj says, Boris Johnson trying to get hydrogen fuel to the UK. This is using solar to generate hydrogen from hot countries like India, Australia, North Africa. Also encouraging land regeneration for farming. That's just a selection of your thoughts for which I'm eternally grateful. And I'm told in my ear, keep them coming because we're not quite off air yet. We may just have a little bit of time at the end, but we shall have to see. But next, I'm delighted to be joined by a very dear friend of mine from the front line of this story, as it were. He is an old friend of mine from the equestrian world, and he is a trucker. You have met Philip Judge before, the owner of Philip Judge International, and I'm delighted to welcome him back right now. Intriguingly, good to see you, first of all, and love to the family, but you sent me a message midweek saying you and colleagues are at your wits' end. Before I come to that, take me through how this hits you as a trucker, a man who owns and runs a business that delivers stuff that I, as a horse owner or somebody who wants grain, then has to pay the price for. How does it work? How does inflation happen in that journey, Phil?
Well, it starts, obviously, we're an agriculturally based transport company and a trading company. So the farming world at the moment, with the prices of red diesel, which is nearly 3 times what it is normally, it starts there. Then we go to the field with the trucks that are running on fuel that are costing up to £750 each, maybe £1,000 if they're running hard, double shifted. Extra a week over the last 12 months, Alistair. And we simply cannot pass these costs on quick enough. Obviously, we do the European work still now. The boats have got BAF fuel surcharges on them. I hold responsible this extreme prices to inflation and costs that we just can't sustain.
And are you picking that up? Because the thrust of your message that you showed me was that you weren't just telling me, you were telling me what was being the conversation that was happening between you and other chums of yours who are in the industry, but perhaps their companies deliver to Tesco, to Iceland, not just in the equestrian world. How widespread is it, Phil?
It's massive. It's an industry, a complete industry. We talk a lot on social media between ourselves. I've got friends, Dave Harris from Cheltenham and Pete White. So we're all in the very same shit. And what is nice is we are standing together with our thoughts here. We don't know what to do. We are seeing businesses that we've worked so hard to build up over many years just being absolutely destroyed by something that we can't understand. There is no shortage of fuel. Why are these prices expensive? Why are the government not looking at this going, well, we need to help these people a little bit by cutting a little bit? Quentin's words were perfect and on the nail. We need to drop price of duty. They're having a massive percentage out of a big cost. Let's drop this, and we need it badly. We cannot. Every industry is linked. The transport industry moves to the construction industry, Alistair. We move stuff to the agriculture industry, the food industry. It is a global thing, and it is a real problem. And I call upon this, the government that I voted for to help and get into action, get into gear, and help stop the rise in inflation costs. They say construction industry now cannot run on red diesel anymore. They're on white diesel. So they've gone up potentially from 42 pence to £1.60. This can only put the price of houses up, construction, farmers. We are in a terrible state with this. We've got the busiest part of our season coming up. We're starting to make hay, starting to do the straw for dairy industry, for meat industry, and it's catastrophic. And as a small businessman that's proud to continue in business, I am seeing my business being absolutely absorbed by primarily fuel cost, and there is no need for it. There's no shortages. Sure. It's just profiteering in a lot of stages, and we're all together as an industry. There's some great guys with me.
Final point. Well, you lead me into it perfectly, and we didn't plan the conversation because you didn't know what I was going to ask you, and I never do that with my guests. But my final point is this. You briefed me on Park Them Up as a campaign. Is that a threat or a prediction, Philip?
I think it's a prediction. It's a threat. We're obviously trying to make people aware. I think that we are too conscientious of our customers and clients and the country. We're not like the French or the Spanish that would have no hesitation in blockading at all. But we have discussed possible options of parking the lorries up. We don't want to parade them, saying that we're not earning money. The only way is to park them up until the economics work out that we can bring them back out on the road to run them and to deliver stuff, which will create shortages, which none of us want at all. It's just absolute desperation on our part at the moment because we are sinking. This huge supertanker of an economy in the UK is struggling to stop, and we're going to have big problems, Alistair.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend, and thank you for being calm and constructive when I know that your family business that you care passionately about is on the line. And I, as a friend, I wish you all the best. And as I said at the beginning, give my love to the family. Hang on in there and keep in touch with us, Philip Judge. There you are. I hope that really informed what it's like to be at the front line, trying to do a service, run a business, support a family. It's not just textbook economic stuff. But isn't it interesting that Philip Judge said it, Quentin Wilson said it, Alan Duncan at the beginning of the programme, and Rory McCallion said it all. There is one very simple thing that your government could do right now that would help them and help you and help me, and it is VAT and it is duty on fuel. I leave that lying upon the table with all of my witnesses. Now, as the nation prepares to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the liberation of the Falkland Islands next week, GBNews has been given access to previously unseen images of that conflict. The pictures, taken at the time by a young Falklands photojournalist, have gone on display at a special exhibition in historic Chatham Dockyard. You can see an extended feature on these powerful images on GBNews digital platforms right now. But here is a sneak preview for you.
The surrender in full swing here. I mean, you can see all the detritus around the streets as well.
These Argentines are being rounded up by British troops. You can see, I think, Paras or Marines doing their best to round them up and at the same time getting these men to clear up a little bit. But the mess was unspeakable. This was one of our general stores here, which had been torched and was gone, but the smoke was still lingering. And when I look at these, I can almost still smell them. It was just a complete scene out of hell.
Wow. A reminder that GB News will, of course, have live coverage throughout a special day of Falklands commemorations next Tuesday. And let me tell you, join me tomorrow. I have one of the most moving interviews that I have ever done with a Falklands widow. You really will want to hear that, and it'll give you a lot to think about. That's tomorrow, but that is all that we've had time for today. Join me again between 12 and 2 if you can tomorrow. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. From all of us, bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, in the UK is looking a breezy day with showers mainly affecting northern and western parts of the UK. Let's take a look at the details. A breezy but mainly fine and dry afternoon across southwest England with plenty of sunny spells. However, there may be the odd showers. Temperatures will reach around 20 degrees Celsius. Across southeast England, it'll be generally dry with plenty of sunny spells, though there is a chance of the odd isolated shower. Across South Wales, a windy afternoon across the high ground and generally breezy elsewhere, with a mixture of sunny spells and some isolated showers. For northwest England, it will be breezy. There will be a mixture of sunny spells and showers, though these will be less frequent than this morning. Temperatures will reach around 19 degrees Celsius. A similar day across the Pennines in northeast England with strong winds, particularly over high ground. Though there will be some blustery showers, there will be plenty of sunny spells in between. A damp afternoon across southern Scotland with showers that could be heavy at times. However, there will be some sunny spells. Remaining windy, though, this will ease later. For Northern Ireland, there'll be a mixture of sunny spells and frequent blustery showers, some of which could be heavy at times. Temperatures will reach around 17 degrees Celsius. Showers will continue across western parts of the UK this evening, though winds will slowly start to ease. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.